On the afternoon of November 6th in Alliance, Ohio, a strange event unfolded in the courthouse parking lot, leaving many to pause and ponder. Was Kayla Ryder, the middle-aged woman causing a disruption, a superhero fighting for justice, or just an individual with an unpleasant attitude refusing to cooperate? The incident began when Kayla, in a rather unusual manner, tried to prevent a man from filing a report at the courthouse, and from there, things quickly spiraled beyond expectations. The story began on a quiet afternoon in the parking lot of the courthouse in Alliance, Ohio, where everything should have proceeded in the calm of a typical workday. The sun cast long shadows across the pavement, the distant hum of traffic barely audible as the courthouse loomed in the background, a solemn structure that had witnessed countless stories of justice being carried out. But when Kayla Ryder, a confident, middle-aged woman, arrived, the atmosphere shifted. Her presence alone seemed to disrupt the calm, like a sudden gust of wind that sent ripples across a still pond. Kayla, with her sharp features and purposeful stride, walked briskly toward the courthouse entrance. She had an air of certainty about her, as if she were the only one who truly understood how the world worked. It was clear from her demeanor that she believed herself to be someone with insights others could never hope to grasp. She wasn't here for any ordinary task. She had come to fix something she saw as broken. Her mission? To intervene in someone else's life and, in her mind, make it better. As she stepped into the parking lot, her eyes immediately locked onto a man standing near the courthouse entrance. He was about to approach the intake desk, a stack of papers in his hand, his face filled with the kind of concentration that suggested he was trying to do something important. To Kayla, it was the perfect moment. She couldn't let him make a mistake, even if he didn't realize he was about to. With a swift, confident movement, she approached him. She didn't bother with pleasantries or introductions. "You're definitely not going to want to file here," she said, her voice firm, as though she held all the secrets of the universe in her hands. Her gaze fixed on him like a teacher looking down at a student who had just made a grave error. "Wait a minute. I think you'll need to rethink this. I don't think the police here understand your issue correctly." The man blinked in confusion. He glanced up from his papers, trying to process the unexpected interruption. "What do you mean?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. He had never seen this woman before, and yet she was acting as though she knew something crucial about his situation, something he hadn't figured out yet. But Kayla wasn't one to let such a moment slip by. She launched into an explanation, each word laden with an air of authority. She outlined a series of reasons, one after the other, that she believed justified her unsolicited intervention. "The police here, they're not equipped to handle this. They won't understand the nuances of your case. You're better off filing somewhere else," she insisted, her voice growing more insistent with each passing sentence. As she spoke, the man felt the weight of her words, though he didn't entirely understand why. He had simply wanted to file a report, but now it seemed as though he had unknowingly stepped into a philosophical debate about the justice system, one where only Kayla had the answers. Her tone made it seem like he had made a monumental mistake by even thinking about submitting his paperwork there. The more Kayla spoke, the more the man became increasingly disoriented. He was no longer focused on his original task. Instead, he was trying to figure out what, exactly, this woman had to gain by interfering. Was she a legal expert? A former cop? Or was she simply someone who had decided on a whim that she knew better than everyone else? Kayla wasn't finished. She stood there, as if waiting for him to understand the enormity of the decision he was about to make. Her eyes narrowed with an intensity that suggested she wasn't just giving advice. She was imparting wisdom, something she believed no one else could offer. "You don't want to end up making things harder for yourself. Trust me," she continued, her voice now taking on a tone of finality, as though her judgment was beyond reproach. The man, feeling the pressure of her gaze and the weight of her words, began to second-guess his own actions. Was this woman right? Was he about to make a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life? And if so, what was his next step? But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling that, in this bizarre moment, he was the one in the wrong. As though his entire course of action had been thrown into question by a complete stranger, a woman who seemed so certain of herself that it felt almost foolish to argue. Yet, Despite Kayla's forceful insistence, the man remained firm. He was there to file his report, and no amount of persuasion could change that. Slowly, he gathered his thoughts and, with a small but resolute shake of his head, replied, "I'm sorry, but I just want to file this report. It's important, and I need to do it here." His voice was calm but final, as if he had drawn a line in the sand. But Kayla, undeterred, wasn't going to give up so easily. She could feel the tension building, a sense of urgency and righteousness coursing through her veins. She wasn't about to let him go without a fight. This wasn't just about a report. It was about her need to be heard, to assert control over a situation that she believed was spiraling out of control. The courthouse, to her, had become a battleground for something much larger, something she couldn't quite articulate, but knew in her bones was important. As the man turned to walk away, a sense of discomfort settled over him. He couldn't help but feel the weight of Kayla's gaze on him as he approached the intake desk. She was still watching him, her expression one of frustration, as if he were committing some egregious error. For a moment he almost turned back to her, to ask her to explain herself, to ask why she cared so much about his decision. But something told him that doing so would only draw him deeper into a conversation that had no end. Kayla watched him go, still standing there, her arms crossed in a stance of stubborn determination. Her mind raced with the belief that she had done something important, that she had somehow protected him from making a grievous mistake. But what she failed to realize was that, in her pursuit of helping him, she had overstepped in ways that would soon come back to haunt her. As the man finally entered the courthouse, Kayla remained in the parking lot, unaware of the storm she had just started, and the deeper consequences her actions would soon bring. "Do you think the police here will understand you?" Kayla continued with a mocking tone. "They're just guards. You should wait and let me help you submit your form in the right place. Trust me, you don't want to fall into this trap." By this point, the man began to feel the tension rising. He started to realize that this conversation wasn't just a kind-hearted piece of advice, but seemed more like a mental assault. Kayla not only rejected his decision to file the report, but also forced him to listen to her arguments, which, in reality, no one had asked for. Yet, no matter how he tried to explain, Kayla wouldn't relent. She began convincing him that he would encounter trouble if he continued, creating a sense that he was about to step into a legal trap that only she could save him from. The conversation gradually escalated into a tense argument. The man began to feel like a puppet in Kayla's hands, though he had no intention of letting her make decisions for him. Kayla grew increasingly impatient with his resistance. "Aren't you listening to me?" she demanded. "You definitely don't want to face things you don't understand. They won't help you. I can help you file your form in the right place. Trust me, I know what's best for you." Despite the man's attempts to explain that he just wanted to file the report and follow the usual process, Kayla remained adamant in her views. She began to exaggerate the dangers within the legal system that she claimed he would face, making him feel as though he was standing on the edge of an unavoidable crisis. At this point, others in the parking lot began to take notice of the argument. A few people standing nearby exchanged glances, silently wondering, what is she doing? But Kayla, with her unwavering confidence, didn't realize the unease she was causing the man. She thought she was saving him from a disaster, while in reality, she was only making things more complicated. However, what Kayla didn't know was that things were about to get much more complicated with the arrival of the police. The police, standing nearby and observing the situation, began to realize that things could escalate further if not addressed promptly. They saw Kayla, a woman who believed she had all the answers, interfering strangely with the life and legal rights of a man who simply wanted to exercise his legal right to file a report. Though there were no signs that the man had asked for her help, Kayla remained insistent, thinking she was saving him from a trouble she believed was unavoidable. In Kayla's mind, everything was clear. She thought she was the only one who could see the truth the man was blind to, that filing here was a serious mistake that would lead to unforeseen consequences. She didn't realize that she was overpowering his right to make decisions and not respecting his personal choices. Kayla believed she was acting fairly and justly, but in reality, it was the opposite. She didn't understand that everyone has the right to decide their own path without interference from others, especially when that interference is entirely unnecessary. Despite Kayla's continuous persuasion that the man should not file the report here and that the police wouldn't understand his issue, her advice didn't convince him. Instead, it made him feel obstructed and confused. He couldn't understand why a stranger would dare to interfere with his personal rights. Each of Kayla's statements felt like a blow to his freedom of action, making him increasingly confused, frustrated, and even angry. What Kayla saw as a well-intentioned conversation, the man experienced as an unnecessary intervention that invaded his freedom. The tension in their argument began to rise. The man started to feel cornered, unable to escape Kayla's imposition, while she, on the other hand, didn't recognize his discomfort. As her patience wore thin, Kayla transitioned from trying to persuade him to an outright defiance. She no longer listened to what the man was saying, but focused solely on asserting that she was right, and he was wrong. Everything intensified when she began challenging the police, quickly turning the situation into an unwanted confrontation between her and the law enforcement officers. At this point, the police could no longer stand by and watch. They realized that Kayla's actions were not only unnecessary interference, but could also become dangerous if not addressed promptly. When the officers approached and asked Kayla to get out of the car to clarify the situation, she immediately reacted, but not with cooperation. Instead, she turned back, her face filled with anger and fear, and shouted in outrage, "Officers, I'm just saving this parking spot. Can you find someone else to bully?" Kayla's tone now was both arrogant and indignant, as if she were the victim of a large-scale bullying incident, when in reality, the police were simply asking her to cooperate to resolve the situation. She didn't realize that her resistance was only making things more complicated. Rather than acknowledging that she was causing discomfort for others and escalating the tension, Kayla believed she was fighting for a noble cause, unaware that she was losing her way. Even though the police only asked her to get out of the car to clarify the matter, Kayla felt like she was being attacked and oppressed. She didn't understand that cooperating with law enforcement was the only way to resolve the situation reasonably. Instead, she clung more tightly to her stance, forcing the police to resort to more forceful measures to make her comply, which ultimately led to an unwanted incident. The police's requests became increasingly patient, but Kayla remained oblivious to the gravity of the situation. It seemed, in her eyes, everything was just a power struggle, and she was the only one holding the key to the outcome. Each time the police asked her to exit the vehicle, she became more defiant, thinking that keeping the car door shut and refusing to get out was an expression of her power and personal freedom that no one could infringe upon. In Kayla's mind, she was fighting for a noble cause, a battle for rights and freedom, when in reality, she was only obstructing herself and those around her. She even locked the car door, as though that would stop a determined and large group of officers. The lock, which she thought was a shield of protection, was actually a testament to her stubbornness and self-deception. In her mind, everything could be solved through her own power, and she saw herself as the one holding all the authority in this situation. She didn't realize that her defiance was only making things worse, and her stubbornness wasn't winning any battles, only exacerbating the discord with law enforcement. When the police realized the situation could no longer continue, they began threatening to break the car window to remove her. But Kayla remained unfazed. To her, this was just a big joke. She didn't believe the police would actually follow through with their threat. Still holding on to her stance, she insisted, "You don't have the right to do that. I haven't committed any crime." Her voice was filled with anger, not just against being asked to get out of the car, but also expressing an unreasonable outrage toward the authority the police represented. Despite this, the police were prepared for the worst-case scenario. They knew the situation could not continue much longer, and all their attempts at persuasion had proven entirely futile. Ultimately, they decided to take more forceful action to get her out of the car, not because they wanted to harm her, but because they needed to ensure the safety of everyone around, and clearly, Kayla was putting not only herself, but others in danger. Just when it seemed like everything had reached its conclusion, an unexpected twist occurred. In an instant, Kayla suddenly changed tactics and decided to embark on a reckless chase. She drove towards the two police cars blocking the road, accelerating and ramming into both vehicles with an unbelievable speed, almost hitting an officer standing nearby. This was a reckless act, not only demonstrating defiance in the face of danger, but also showing that Kayla had no awareness of the peril she and others were now facing. At this point, the police could no longer watch her continue her speed display. Everything had crossed a line, and Kayla's actions were no longer seen as a lawful or justified resistance, but as a disruption to public order. With precision and speed, the police deployed a taser to subdue Kayla, and in a moment, she became an uncontrollable superhero, shocked not once, but twice. The numbness hit immediately, but even then, Kayla refused to give up. She wouldn't allow herself to realize that her resistance was now pointless. She still believed she was fighting for a noble cause, but didn't see that she was merely trapped in an endless spiral of her own making. At this point, the police could no longer watch her continue her speed display. Everything had crossed a line, and Kayla's actions were no longer seen as a lawful or justified resistance, but as a disruption to public order. With precision and speed, the police deployed a taser to subdue Kayla, and in a moment, she became an uncontrollable superhero, shocked not once, but twice. The numbness hit immediately, but even then, Kayla refused to give up. She wouldn't allow herself to realize that her resistance was now pointless. She still believed she was fighting for a noble cause, but didn't see that she was merely trapped in an endless spiral of her own making. With the pain and paralysis from the electric shock, Kayla continued to resist fiercely. "Don't touch me. I just want freedom. You don't understand," she screamed in the parking lot, as though she were engaged in a great battle for personal freedom. While her words seemed powerful and full of passion, in reality, they were just a manifestation of her defiance of reality and her misunderstanding of the situation. Kayla was facing a law enforcement force with no intention of infringing upon her rights, but was simply asking her to cooperate in resolving a situation she had created. In her mind, though, it was still a battle between her and the system, and she didn't realize that her stubbornness was the very thing that had led her deeper into this predicament. With the pain and paralysis from the electric shock, Kayla continued to resist fiercely. "Don't touch me. I just want freedom. You don't understand," she screamed in the parking lot, as though she were engaged in a great battle for personal freedom. While her words seemed powerful and full of passion, in reality, they were just a manifestation of her defiance of reality and her misunderstanding of the situation. Kayla was facing a law enforcement force with no intention of infringing upon her rights, but was simply asking her to cooperate in resolving a situation she had created. In her mind, though, it was still a battle between her and the system, and she didn't realize that her stubbornness was the very thing that had led her deeper into this predicament. The police tried to explain and offer assistance, but Kayla remained adamant in rejecting all of it. "I can heal myself. Don't bother me," she declared with a nonchalant expression, as if she had the ability to magically heal from the shock. This overconfidence, at first glance, might seem like a sign of mental strength, but in reality, it was a clear sign of a serious lack of understanding of the situation and a refusal to accept any intervention. Kayla not only rejected the help offered but also acted as though she had complete control over the situation, despite the fact that she was being subdued by the police and no longer had the freedom to do as she wished. Despite their growing frustration with her attitude, the police remained firm in their stance, ensuring that she wouldn't leave the scene until all procedures were completed. The scene then became a bizarre performance between Kayla and the police, with her acting as though she were the one with the power, confronting law enforcement, while in reality, she was only making things more chaotic and dangerous than ever. Kayla's stubborn actions not only reflected a lack of understanding about her own rights and responsibilities, but also demonstrated a blindness to the nature of the law. She failed to recognize that she was not the only one with power in this situation. The police were the ones with authority and an obligation to enforce the law. After the unimaginable actions, Kayla was finally arrested and faced serious charges that she could not deny. Her reckless chase with 2 police cars, crashing into them and nearly injuring an officer, led to charges of assaulting an officer and obstructing justice. She not only violated the requirement to cooperate with the police, but also demonstrated an excessive determination to disrupt public order. Her actions not only endangered herself, but also placed others at risk, especially when an officer almost sustained injuries due to her reckless behavior. Furthermore, her refusal to cooperate, resisting arrest, and rejecting assistance from law enforcement only made the charges more severe, as she not only caused a disturbance, but also delayed and hindered the process of administering justice. The police took her to Stark County Jail, where her life would no longer be a humorous adventure. There, Kayla was no longer a superhero, with the freedom to express herself through defiant actions against the law. Instead, she was faced with harsh legal realities and a trial process that could make her realize that sometimes fighting the system is not an act of heroism, but a wrong decision that can lead to severe consequences. For Kayla, jail was not just a place of confinement, but a place where her misguided ideals would finally face reality. As she was placed in the cell, Kayla could not help but feel overwhelmed by the swift change in her life. From a woman who had once considered herself noble for preventing others from exercising their legal rights, she was now confronting the harsh reality of the legal system. In the small cell, the clanking of chains served as a reminder that impulsive actions can never fix everything. The jail was not only where Kayla was held, but also where she had to confront one of the toughest lessons of her life. Sometimes, not everyone can be a hero when standing against authority and the law. She also gradually realized that while she might have been able to fight and impede others from doing things she disagreed with before, when faced with the police and the legal system, she was just an ordinary person, unable to escape her responsibilities. Kayla had once thought she could challenge everything without consequence, but now, the price she had to pay was a costly lesson. She failed to recognize that holding on to her personal power in this situation was not the act of a hero, but of someone who misunderstood the true nature of power and responsibility in society. In the following days, she faced tight supervision from prison staff and fellow inmates, while the charges against her were still under investigation and trial. Every day, she began to understand that while she might have won in preventing others from doing what they wanted, when standing before legal authorities, she was the one who had to pay for her reckless actions. The steps she took, believing herself to be right, the glamorous ideals of personal freedom she once pursued, were now just hollow words in the strict context of the legal system. And while she might find ways to justify those actions, all she now faced were inevitable charges and an uncertain future. Kayla's story is not just a classic example of arrogance and self-importance, but a cautionary tale for those who think they can get away with disregarding the law through thoughtless actions. When facing law enforcement, every action carries responsibility, and while Kayla may have seen herself as a hero in the moment, in the end, she was just someone who had to face the consequences of her actions. Kayla's story is a clear example of how arrogance and pride can lead to serious consequences, not only for oneself, but also for those around them. Kayla, with her strong belief in her abilities and her conviction that she was always right, placed herself in a risky situation. While she thought she was fighting for personal freedom and protecting her rights, in reality, she was only complicating the issue and refusing to acknowledge the fact that she had crossed the line of reason. Kayla's resistance was not a heroic act, but a confrontation with the very principles and responsibilities that society demands. The biggest lesson from this story is the importance of having a clear understanding of one's limits and responsibilities in any situation. While we have the freedom to choose and defend our personal views, it does not mean we can interfere with the lives and rights of others in an unreasonable way. Opposing something without fully understanding the circumstances can lead to poor decisions and disrupt the harmony of the community. Additionally, cooperating with authorities and respecting legal processes are essential to protecting our rights and the safety of ourselves and others. When we refuse to cooperate and stubbornly insist that we are always right, we only bring trouble upon ourselves. Learning to listen, manage our egos, and accept help when needed are crucial factors in avoiding unnecessary situations. Kayla's story also serves as a reminder that persistence and resistance don't always lead to positive outcomes. Sometimes they are simply a path to misdirection and self-destruction.